All right, welcome back. This is 12 for 12s. We're doing a special segment here. I'm inserting this into the show. This is recorded Thursday evening, a little after 7 on the 30th of October. Yes, the day before Halloween. So make sure you got your costumes ready, everybody. I am joined by my guest, Levi Damien from SB Nation's Silver and Black Pride, the editor and lead writer for the organization with SB Nation. Obviously, we're very happy to be joined by him to give a little preview of the Oakland Raiders coming to town this Sunday. Levi, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fantastic. Good to be here.
Well, why don't you take a few moments, because obviously I'm sure some of our listeners don't always read your website. I'd love to, first of all, just start by giving them a little introduction to you and your writing and talk a little bit about Silver and Black Pride.
Well, I've been covering the Raiders since probably, I think it was early 2008, actively covering them. I had my own site back then. I've been writing for SB Nation for Silver and Black Pride since early 2012. Covering the Raiders, of course, and I came on at Silver and Black Pride as the lead writer and editor, whatever title you want to give it, immediately. And when I came in, and just been trucking along, trying to keep up with the Raiders and all their lovely winning ways.
Oh, as a lifetime football fan, I think it's tough for me to see what's really become of that organization. What Al Davis, for good and bad, and how people perceive him. I think for any real football fan, you always got to have a soft spot in your heart for him. Just the way he did things, the maverick that he was. But this year's team is obviously struggling, and it's been kind of a continual, yearly thing now it's becoming, is that the Raiders are kind of a joke, unfortunately. And I guess from your perspective, why don't you give us a little synopsis on what's gone on so far this year, obviously with the 0-7 start, and talk a little bit about what's really happening there in Raiderland.
Well, you go back to the off season to figure out how they got here, where they are right now, the 0-7 mark. They basically had to start over again from what essentially is the third offseason in a row. This time they had $61 million to spend under the cap, which is a record. And so, but they had a lot of positions to fill. So what Reggie McKenzie's, from his perspective, what he wanted to do was try to fill every position in free agency. So there was like 13 different positions he set out to fill with that cap money that he had to spend. And so he just went out and tried to find a bunch of guys who, had winning pedigree, and maybe their previous team gave up on them, didn't think they had anything left in the tank, or the previous team just simply wanted to move on to the next guy. And he was hoping to build a team that could, be a placeholder in essence until he could have another draft or two under his belt to build the team up. So these guys would be stopgaps, if you will. It was most popular term to use, and it just didn't work out. The guys, we kind of finding out that most of these guys is a reason why the previous team didn't want them around, and it wasn't a very well coached team. I mean, Dennis Allen was fired for good reason. I mean, to be honest, he probably should have been fired after last season. I think though they won't admit it, they realized they made a mistake in bringing him back for another season. But they tried to remedy it during the bye week by letting him go and doing the only thing they could do, which was promote assistant head coach Tony Sperano to interim head coach. And Sperano has been able to command respect of the team a lot more than Dennis Allen ever did. So that's good. He's very liked by the team. It's kind of a similar situation, which Seahawks fans are probably somewhat familiar with, is when Tom Cable was the head coach in Oakland. It was a very almost identical situation. Lane Kiffin, first 4 games, he was fired. Same exact situation. Tom Cable came in. He was But in that case, Tom Cable was bumped all the way from offensive line coach to head coach, which is what Sperano was. But Tom Cable never had the title of assistant head coach at that point. And Cable was very well liked. He was here. He was a coach for 2 seasons, and then for 2 full seasons after that. And then when he was let go, there were a lot of. He was so well liked. There were a lot of angry, current Raiders, and a couple of them ended up going to Seattle with him.
Yep.
Robert Gallery, Zach Miller, and that was part of it. They really liked Tom Cable. They didn't like to see him go. So back to basically it's a similar situation with Sperano. They're kind of hoping to get this team to play above what they previously thought they were capable, and maybe pull out a win or two.
To stay on that, and I'd love to get your perspective. And I actually personally thought, like you, Tom Cable was a good fit down there in Oakland. And he's really been magnificent here as our O-line coach and offensive, I guess, kind of part offensive assistant head coach and coordinator with the offensive Darrell Bevel. What was it that you guys liked about what he was building there? What was positive about that?
Well, what was positive about Tom Cable is, like I said, he was just kind of a blue-collar guy that, you look at guys like Bill Belichick, for instance. You look at guys like maybe Rex Ryan. They're the guys that are just kind of like this. You respect them. They're not. Putting Rex Ryan and Bill Belichick in the same category seems odd, considering one is so non-personnel and the other is the opposite of that. But they both share the quality that they're just kind of, like I said, kind of blue collar guys that you respect just for that. They're not. Dennis Allen was, and Hugh Jackson as well. They're guys that they're like politicians, if you will.
Yeah.
They're very much that. You could see them. You're like, you could run for office someday. But you'd never think that about a guy like Sperano or a guy like Tom Cable. And the coaches respect that. And not the coaches, but the players respect that. And I think it's also kind of something to do with being an offensive line guy. You respect the trenches, you respect the dirty work, you respect the run game, the tradition of football, the way it's football is rooted in the run game, and you have guys like that respect that, so you respect them for that.
You brought up Reggie McKenzie here just a little earlier, and actually, I've been reading your site this last week, and I noticed a great piece you wrote regarding a local a sports radio guy and his comments regarding Reggie McKenzie, basically how he's even allowed his car back in the parking lot. And I this is interesting because, we've actually talked in this offseason, John Schneider and this whole Ron Wolf tree of different, personnel guys, now GMs. Reggie's one of those guys. And what is it that Reggie is or isn't doing that you agree or disagree with that obviously is continuing this issue and I guess degrade in Oakland?
Well, I think his big mistake was just, it kind of goes back to just the way he approached this job. He came in here, and it's hard to say that a guy who has as much experience in an NFL front office could actually have some naivete about it. And I think that's because he came from an organization that had success pretty much the entire time he was there. They were a well-respected, successful organization, and who had a steady hand at quarterback, from Brett Favre right on through Aaron Rodgers. And then he comes to the Raiders and he brings that same philosophy that he's going to play hardball with the free agents. He's not going to get tied down with guaranteed money and pushing contracts out and dead money that, if you cut them and stuff like that. And the Raiders just weren't in the position to do that. They weren't in the position where you could act like you are the Packers and still get good free agents to come here and keep your own good free agents here. So approaching it that way, I think that was the wrong move. You can't, maybe down the road that might be, but I can't foresee him being here when the team gets themselves back to a place where they can sit back and fold their arms with the prospective free agent and their agent across the desk and say, okay, this is how what I'm willing to give you, take it or leave it.
So
and
go ahead.
What ended up happening, the major league, like Lissier, for instance, in particular, I mean, you kind of write off the first couple of years because of the fact that they didn't have a lot of cap room, even though there were still some things he could have done. That being, like, you could have signed some contracts that were a little backloaded. Maybe he would have tied you up a little bit in the future, but he was completely unwilling to do that. He kind of dug his heels on that. But this offseason in particular, with all the money he had to spend, and the top 3 free agents on the Raiders all left, all of them. And in at least 2 of those cases, that being Rashad Jennings and Jared Beldier, they were given low figures. Despite the amount of money that he had to spend, the amount of money he has to spend to meet the 90%, the 85% rule or whatever it is for the cap number. And they just left. And you're trying to build a foundation, and you're letting all the good players that you have on the team right now walk, having to start completely over again for the third straight year. That's tough to swallow.
It just seems like the Raiders can't, despite themselves, can't end that Al Davis methodology of his last 10 years or so, which is always getting the fastest guy, the deep threat, old guys that had done very well at some point in their career, whether it was a Pro Bowl or all or all pro, and yet it's the same thing. You look at them; they got a bunch of deep threats on the outside, and then kind of transitioning now to the offense, deep threats on the outside, and old guys in the defensive secondary that have had good careers. Are you still there, Levi?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. So with all that said, it just seems to me like they can't end that struggle. Is that Mark Davis, or is that something else inside the organization?
Well, I mean, the philosophy is definitely different now. I mean, there's still some holdovers from Al Davis' time. I mean, you say there's some deep threats there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So there's still some deep threats there, but I mean, like Denarius Moore, guys like that were. But I really think it's more of a coincidence, if anything, that there are still similarities between this team and the ones that were here before.
Okay.
Because when you look at the players, the priority has been on things like character and everybody wants to bring winners onto the team, and the reason why he got these guys that he got is simply because they already had their successes, and they're just still trying to prolong their careers, and they have something to prove that they can still play a couple more years in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk offense here, and let's get in. And I personally think Derek Carr, for instance, is going to be a highlight for you going forward as a rookie QB. Live arm. Obviously, he's going through his growing pains, but he still shows a lot of explosiveness. Do you believe he's the right man for the job, leading the Raiders into the future over the next 10 years?
He looks it so far. I mean, the areas that he's struggled, you can see improvements in them, and there are also areas that most rookies struggle in. And he hasn't. I mean, I've seen plenty of rookies that have struggled a lot more than he has. He came in pretty ready to do this. I think he surprised the coaches a little bit, even though they knew that he had his older brother, and he'd been, looking at NFL film since he was, game tape since he was 12 years old. So he knows the game. He's smart, but he comes in and he struggled a little bit early. You can, as long as you see that he's progressing, like I can say from my perspective, I've noticed just his pocket presence alone, which is one of the things that he was criticized about a lot when he in college and even early on in the preseason and early in the season. But his pocket presence has gotten steadily better as the season goes on. So, you think of it, you allow some forgiveness for the fact that he's a rookie, and that all you're really looking for is to see that he's capable of fixing his mistakes. And from this point, it looks like he is. He already had the qualities he already had were, he's got all the physical talents. He throws it like a perfect ball and everything. He can make every throw, as they like to say, and he's pretty accurate too. He can put it right where it needs to be. Just all those little intricacies that every rookie and every quarterback in the NFL has to go through. So, long story longer. He from this point, it does look like he could be the quarterback of the future. Enough so that they're, even if they have the number one pick, they're not going to be going after a guy like Mariota. They'd be more likely to trade that pick to do something like that.
Raiders are currently 32nd, unfortunately, on the running side. And, this is a team that has always been legendary for their running game. Going back Marcus Allen, obviously the Bo Jackson, watching that Brian Bosworth 30 for 30 the other night and seeing him run over the Boz, probably brought some warm little areas back to your heart. Tony Sperano is a line guy, like you mentioned, and he's a great offensive line coach. He's an innovator. He brought up the Wildcat a few years back. He was the first guy to really get into that down in Miami. Do you think you have the weapons to change this season's ranking with the running game, MJD, Darren McFadden, by the end of the year?
No, I don't think they do. You look at Darren McFadden, and even at his best, he's a speed guy. He needs open space, and he'll basically just run very quickly through open space until somebody's there to tackle him. He doesn't break tackles really very well, and as much as I actually thought that Maurice Jones-Drew might return to form when I watched him in the preseason, and he just doesn't look like he's got it. He looks like he's done.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say he is absolutely, but right now he's averaging he's hovering around 2 yards per carry. Every time he touches the ball, he can't get through the line. It doesn't look like he's got anything left. Who knows? Maybe he'll find something and get his previous form. But the two of them together, it's like, okay, great. They can share the load. Nobody gets overworked. But I just don't see it in either of them to be able to change the ranking of the Raiders too much. And as far as the offensive line goes, what you're looking at is your guards. You have a rookie starting at left guard who's been pretty good, and then at right guard you have a former right tackle who wasn't really very highly rated even as a tackle, but they brought him in here and made him a guard because run blocking was supposed to be his strength, and he has not lived up to that billing at all. He's looked completely out of his element at guard trying to run block. So, I mean, that's what you rely on when you're talking about the run game. Mostly is you rely on those two guards on the left and right guard for that. And little spurts here and there, they managed to get things going, but they've never been able to. I don't think once during this season have they gone over 100 yards.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the wide receiver core? It seems like I'd call it a no-name group minus maybe James Jones, who you got out of Green Bay last year. But, you got the guy, Kimbrel Tompkins. He was a young guy last year with the Patriots. I know he had a couple catches last week. Andre Jones, Demarius Moore, which you already mentioned. Are these guys any good, and can they help the growth process with Derek Carr and where he's trying to go this year and hopefully into next year?
It's going to take a number one guy for this unit to get to where they need to be. You hear Derek Carr talk about he trusts his receivers, and so he's not afraid of corners. Like, that's one thing that he's faced, like every Pro Bowl and All-Pro corner through this season already. He's about to face Richard Sherman, and that's pretty much, let's run the gamut. I'd like to go back and find out if any quarterback has ever faced a run of, Darrelle Revis, Patrick Peterson, Joe Hayden, now Richard Sherman. Heck, he faced him in the preseason. And he said, he says he's fearless. He goes after them. But the thing is it hasn't, he had some success against Darrelle Revis. Brandon Flowers is another one, and he had some decent success against him. But other than that, it hasn't been great. And it has to do with he sees the coverage he wants, and then he just throws to the receiver and hopes that his receiver can make the play. And in most cases they can't, because there isn't a receiver on this team that can dominate these top flight corners. There's no number one receiver, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
But James Jones has done really well. He's his favorite target. James Jones is, but James Jones, he's never been that guy. He's never been that number one receiver. I think the best he's ever done was a year that he had like 14 touchdowns, but he still wasn't a top guy in that offense in Green Bay. And I see some good things from Kenbrell Tompkins, but it very much remains to be seen how much potential he has. It really is going to take. They really do need to bring in a top flight number one wide receiver that, kind of like Matt Schaub when they brought him in. There was a lot of talk about, that he had Andre Johnson all this time, that he knew that if it was a 50-50 ball, you threw it Andre Johnson's way, he's going to come with it. And how Schaub was going to exist in this Raiders offense without having a guy like Andre Johnson here. And we never really had to worry about answering that question, obviously, because he had the elbow soreness and never got the starting job. But Derek Carr needs that too. He needs his big brother had Andre Johnson in Houston to throw to, and you need a guy like that to really do well, unless you're Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, and who knows if Derek Carr is that guy.
Well, let's shift over to the defensive side of the ball, and I think truly the Raiders got one of the gems in this year's rookie class in drafting Khalil Mack out of Buffalo. He's already got 10 tackles for loss in 7 games. In your mind, in your opinion, how is he contributing to the Raiders defense so far?
He's just about everything to that Raiders defense. He is, every game he gets better. It's one of those things where as a journalist, you're like, well, I'm starting to sound like a broken record. I mean, I've heard all the superlatives. I've used a lot of the superlatives, and there's just nothing left to say. Every week he surprises you again. It's like, my God, this guy's good. Pete Carroll just said that he used words that were almost just like the words that I used last week to describe Khalil Mack. I said he was nearly unblockable, and Pete Carroll said he's almost unblockable. I was like, is he reading my articles or not? No, he's just watching Khalil Mack play, and he's just about unblockable. And it's really amazing. You watch him, and you're like, how come everyone can't do this? It looks that easy for him. He's just like, he gets around every block to stop the run, and now he's doing a lot. He's really come up in the pass rush as well. He's getting some criticism for not having a sack yet, but a sack is coming. One stat that I noticed today is that in the first 4 weeks he had 3 quarterback hurries, and he has 14 over the past 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming. And last week, if you watched the Raiders play the Browns, it seemed Hoyer was throwing with Khalil Mack in his grill about half the time. And credit to Hoyer for being able to get those passes away with Mack right in his face. But it's like there are plenty of times in which there's going to be a time in which a quarterback decides to tuck that ball in for risk of turning it over and just getting the sack instead. But the pressure for the incompletion is just about as good.
Levi, it seems to me that the defensive line for the Raiders has struggled immensely this year so far, ranking 26th against the run. There was some talent there that we kind of expected to be a little bit better than it is. Some of the free agency pickups. Benson Mayowa, obviously, is someone that's really come on because of that situation here, and he's obviously someone we know up here in Seattle. Tell us a little bit about what is right and wrong with that front four for the Oakland Raiders.
Well, I haven't really seen the D-line do much of anything, to be honest. The 2 big free agent acquisitions were, well, actually 3, if you consider Lamar Woodley, Justin Tuck, and Antonio Smith. And Lamar Woodley, he's out for the season. He's on IR. But even before that, he was doing nothing. Now, here's another guy that you guys will recognize his name, Benson Mayowa.
Yes.
Who you guys cut with the final cuts, and the Raiders immediately picked him up because he kind of ripped him a new one in that final preseason game. And they're like, well, they're going to let him go. We want this guy on our team. And he was backing up Lamar Woodley. Lamar Woodley, I found this to be an interesting discovery, is that Lamar Woodley, the first 6 games, he was healthy for 6 games. He had 5 tackles, 3 of which were solo tackles. Benson Mayowa, in 6 quarters, less than 6 quarters, since taking over for Lamar Woodley, had 5 tackles, 3 solo tackles. So the exact same numbers in 6 quarters as Lamar Woodley had in 6 games. So it was for the best that Lamar Woodley sit down and let Mayowa have his shot. And he started last week, and he looked really good, quite good. At one point, they had a bubble screen to Andrew Hawkins, the wide receiver, out to the right, and he went 48 yards downfield. It would have been a touchdown, but Mayowa chased him 48 yards down the field and tackled him, and saved a touchdown because they had to kick a field goal instead. But you don't expect the defensive end to be able to do that. And the Raiders used to get that kind of production from Lamar Houston, but he was one of the free agents that left this offseason. They were hoping that Lamar Woodley they could get something out of him. He's under 30. There's more like it was injuries and, ironically or appropriately, if you will, and cap casualty situation that had him leaving Pittsburgh. But hopefully Mayowa can help that defensive end position. Tuck at this point is a situational pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
They picked up a guy named C.J. Wilson from the Packers, who's a backup defensive end, like a bigger guy who's more of a run stopper. But oddly enough, he's tied for the team lead in sacks with 2. And so overall, the defensive line was an utter disappointment. And if it weren't for guys like Khalil Mack and C.O. Moore stepping up at the outside linebacker position, it would look even worse than it does, which is saying something considering it's looked pretty bad. The defensive line has put a lot of pressure on the linebackers, and for the most part, like I said, C.O. Moore and Khalil Mack have been able to hold up to that pressure. Miles Burris in the middle has not been able to pick up the slack for the defensive line woes. So that's what's affecting the run game and the lack of pass rush and everything.
Speaking of Benson Mayowa, I think you guys got really a steal there, being able to pick him up after we cut him. We chose to keep O'Brien Schofield, and he was one of those fan favorites, just so you know, because he was an undrafted free agent out of Idaho, and I hope he does extremely well for you. So good luck having Benson there. Let's talk secondary. I mentioned earlier a lot of experience, let's just say, in that department. Woodson, Carlos Rogers, Brown. Again, you guys have been probably been passed against as much as any team, but they've allowed right now you're 13th in the league, only 3 interceptions against the pass. How do you see them scheming against Russell Wilson and the attack that we're going to throw at you?
Oh, I don't think I can answer that question, really, because what Russell Wilson is able to do in that offense, that almost seems like the Achilles heel of this defense. There's so many times in which you see they line up in zone. And to say that they find a soft spot in the zone doesn't really cover it. It's like, that's not a soft spot. It just looks like they just were standing out in the field and the quarterback just threw in between them. And there's so much room. Sometimes it really baffles me, the amount that just, and a guy that's mobile like Russell Wilson to be able to get out and create some space and to get his receivers moving around. The best asset the Raiders have right now in the secondary is Charles Woodson, which is amazing considering he's 38 years old. But he's playing playing great.
Mm-hmm.
You come into this season thinking this is his final season for sure. But the way he's playing right now, I don't know why he couldn't come back again for another season at 39. The problem, the problem doesn't seem to be so much the corners as the scheme. It always seems like there's somebody there, that there's a huge wide open space, just like, how come there's nobody over there covering this man? How is it that there's a running back who's squirting out of the backfield, and the whole left side of the field doesn't have a guy over there? You wonder if is it the defensive coordinator? Is it the middle linebacker not lining people up? Is it a blown coverage? What is it? Sometimes it just doesn't become obvious what that is. So to be honest, I really can't tell you how the Raiders would go about stopping a guy like Russell Wilson and the Seattle offense. From what I've seen the Seattle do this year, most times when they've struggled, they beat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so unless the Seahawks beat themselves, which I've seen them do a couple times, what was it that they were beating themselves most of the game against Carolina until at the end there.
Yep, 2 turnovers inside the red zone. Yep.
Yeah, and you watch them, you're like, what are you guys doing? What is going on? And I remember tweeting this when I was watching the game, that despite the struggles that the Seahawks were having, you still get the feeling that they could just turn it on at any moment.
Yeah.
And they could just like shake out of it, like it's some type of, like it was like, oh, what were we thinking? We can do this. We just won the Super Bowl. We can do this. So that's the only way that I could see the Raiders secondary stopping with the Seahawks bring, is if the Seahawks beat the Seahawks.
Well, let's get to keys.
I wish I could give you a better answer.
Well, you know what? You did a lot of good things there, and I appreciate some of the kind talk you mentioned about our Seahawks. Obviously, we're trying to be a little bit of a pundit here and not be completely biased, but I do appreciate it. So thank you. Let's get to our keys to the game. We'll wrap this up. And again, thank you so much for being on with me. The way I do this segment is I'll give you I'll ask for you to give me the offensive key, 3 keys for the Raiders. I'll give you the 3 defensive keys for Seattle. Then I'll just reciprocate and do the offensive keys for Seattle, and you give me the defensive keys for the Raiders. So if that made any sense. So why don't you go ahead and start off with your 3 offensive keys to victory for the Raiders?
Well, I think that as far as the offensive keys, first of all, what Derek Carr has to do is what he's been doing is like I said earlier, is that he's looking at the coverage and saying, okay, that's the coverage I want, and then just throwing it for that guy. And he's got to drop back and go through his reads. He has too much of a tendency to say, that's the coverage I want, and then he stares down that guy and he throws an incompletion. And he's lucky he hasn't been intercepted in a lot of those cases. He has to go through his reads. That's the first key. The second key is the right tackle position for the Raiders, and that has been Menelik Watson since Khalif Barnes went out, and now Khalif Barnes is healthy again. So it's hard to say right now. It'll depend on Menelik Watson's health who goes in at right tackle. But last week, both of them looked terrible at different points. So they couldn't protect. There was at least one case where there was a free rusher that just smacked Derek Carr right in the face. So that right tackle position, that whoever's playing there has to do their job and keep Derek Carr protected. So that's the second key on offense. And I would say, the third key would be a third key. I'm trying to think of what a third key would be. Well, it's drop passes. That's what it is. The Raiders receivers have dropped a lot of passes this season. You got a guy like Andre Holmes who has the size and he has the leaping ability, but he has these mysterious drops. And they like to say, it always happens at the worst time. Well, just about any time is the worst time. and he's not alone, but he's one of the biggest culprits. Is they absolutely must stop dropping the ball, because if Derek Carr gets it there, this offense is not powerful enough to be able to make up for dropped passes.
I'll give you my 3 defensive keys. Now, I do think this is a tough matchup for you guys, and especially some of the things you just mentioned there. Young quarterback coming into the clink, which is obviously not an easy place to play. How he's going to deal with not just the team on the other side of the ball, but the noise. And that's why I think first thing out of the box, we got to try to make Derek Carr beat us. And if we can do that, I think that's going to be a successful day. Second, help the Raiders with their turnovers, meaning give them the opportunity to give us the ball, keep throwing like you mentioned, and if Derek Carr is not going to make the right read or go through his progressions, make sure we're in the right spot, meaning play sound defense and sound defensively in the secondary especially. 3, control the line of scrimmage and don't give you guys a running game at all. I mean, we had last year a couple of times, one in particular at home. Tampa Bay came in here and was 21-0 up on us. And Bobby Rainey, who nobody even knew existed on their roster, had over 100 yards, almost 200 yards rushing that day in our house. We can't allow that. So we can't let some of your weapons, even though they haven't gone off yet this year, go off in any way, shape, or form. Turning over to the offensive side, again, I think there's a lot of positive things here, but you do have playmakers. Obviously, Khalil Mack is a guy that, unfortunately, with this offense, sometimes they can look fantastic, unstoppable. Sometimes they look like it's basically, we're going to give you the ball, and we can't make those mistakes. Third down has been a huge issue for us for the last 2 years, believe it or not, and our percentage has been low 30%. I'm just trying to ask us to get over 40%. So that's my goal for this game. Keep third down percentage over 40%. Second, kind of laying into what we were just talking about, take care of the ball. And then third, establish Marshawn Lynch. His carries this year have been probably more along the 15 to 16 carries per game. We need to get him a 20-carry game. We need to get a big game out of Marshawn, I think 100 yards plus and a touchdown. Just get Marshawn into the groove, make sure he's a part of an active game plan, and I think that's going to benefit the Seahawks. Your defensive keys for the Raiders against this Seattle offense?
Well, the first one is to keep Russell Wilson in the pocket. The moment that he's able to get out of the pocket, that's when it becomes the most troublesome. We talked a little bit about this earlier, that if he can get out of the pocket and he can move around and he gives receivers a chance to get open, that's when he can make things happen against his Raiders defense. And the other wrinkle to that is there's a lot of times in which it looks like the Raiders are able to close the pocket, but then the middle opens up like the Red Sea and there's no one there. And so it's like the quarterback's like, well, I can't roll out, but they're just giving me a scramble for the first down. So, and that is where guys like Miles Burris come in. There was one instance, I'm trying to think of what game it was. I can't remember what game it was, where instead of staying at home and protecting the middle of the field, he just rushed up the middle, got blocked on his keister, and then the quarterback just ran free. And so to remain disciplined and to protect the edges and just keep Russell Wilson in that pocket, keep him from moving around. Mm-hmm. That's the number one key, I think. The second one is and this is easier said than done, and this goes back to the Seahawks being the Seahawks, is turnovers. They have to get turnovers. As you said, there's only 3 interceptions on the season, and I think that's a big reason why they're 0-7. They're the only guy who's consistently making plays in the secondary in coverage is Charles Woodson. He has 2 of those interceptions. Mm-hmm. So they have to create turnovers, however that is, force fumbles, interceptions, whatever the case may be. And the third one, I feel like the Texas governor. The third one, oops. trying to think I had difficulty finding a third one last time.
Marshawn Lynch.
Well, yeah, well, I know. I mean, but that's just so easy. That's, you know what I'm saying? It's like, well, duh. You have to stop Marshawn Lynch from going beast mode on you. I mean, so yeah, I guess that's it. Like I said, it's too easy, but if it's staring you in the face, then that's what it is. I mean, the Raiders have a guy like Khalil Mack who's there for the purpose of stopping Marshawn Lynch. I expect the Seahawks to try to run away from Khalil Mack. So let's say this. This is how we'll get more specific. Somebody other than Khalil Mack has to stop the run, because I fully expect the Seahawks to stay as far away from Khalil Mack as they can.
Okay.
So for this to happen, Seal Moore has to have another game like he did last week. Benson Mayowa has to have another game like he did last week. They have to step up and stop the run so that they don't put it all on Mac's shoulders or have Mac like being double teamed while Marshawn Lynch is going beast mode on.
So
that's my three keys.
In your guys' setup, if I remember, Khalil Mack, is he your right outside linebacker? Right side outside linebacker? So he's going to be going against the left side. So you expect us to want to run to the right is what I'm hearing, correct?
Either run to the right or simply double team Khalil Mack.
Okay.
And go wherever you like.
But he's unblockable.
Yeah. Well, he's gotten through double teams before. So
right.
But he's not the Terminator. So let's. The problem is, that even if they double team Mac, you put one guy on Miles Burris, and that's enough. That's plenty for Miles Burris. He's not shown the ability to consistently shed even a single block. I hate to be so hard on the guy, but he's not a middle linebacker. That's the main problem. I know you guys have a issue. You're starting an undrafted rookie at middle linebacker this week, are you not?
Yep, Brock Coyle, yep.
Both in the same boat as far as the middle linebacker position is concerned. Although who knows? Maybe this guy you guys got, this guy he can hold it down. But we've proven that we've seen so far that Miles Burris is not a middle linebacker. He's done marginal work at weak side linebacker, but yeah, he's a desperation move with Nick Roach being out for the season.
The one thing I'll say about Brock Coyle and his defense is he has a real good nose for the ball, and that's one of the reasons we kept him as an undrafted guy making this team. That's not easy to do, but Seattle seems to find those guys, like you said, Benson Mayowa, and we do wish him the best of luck down there in Oakland. Well, we've come to the end of our time, and again, Levi, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you coming on, and we'll make sure we get all this up and available to you so you can post it on Silver and Black Pride. I know that you're available on YouTube. I'm sorry, on Twitter. Silver and Black P is the handle. Do you give out your personal Twitter or just?
Yeah. It's just at Levi Damien.
Okay, perfect.
Damien.
LeviDamien. I'll have all those links available on 12for12s.com, my website as well. Any other, places they can find you and your work, if you want to provide that to the listeners, that'd be fantastic.
No, that's the only place I write. Is I still own the site that I owned back when I first began, but I don't write on that site any longer. I have a guy, Asher Matthews, if you like, he's a really good writer at thoughtsfromthedarkside.com. TFDSsports.com is what it is. So he's worth following if you're into that kind of thing.
Awesome.
If you're into Raiders reading.
Hey, I think a lot of people are in there looking deep in their closets to find our Raider Buster shirts from years gone by in the AFC West. And I think this is a fun rivalry to kind of have this year. We do it in preseason, but it doesn't really matter. I think this is a cool game just for that. I just wish you guys were better, and I don't say that in a patronizing way. I don't think you think I do. I really wish the Raiders were better because, man, it was fun seeing them, like we were talking about the Boz. I mean, the Boz would have been perfect on the Raiders. Just kind of a bunch of jerks kicking ass. So I miss that. My best friend is a lifelong Raider fan, even though he's got season tickets to the Hawks. So what do you do?
Well, I'm from Portland, so most of my friends are Seahawks fans.
Well, there you go. Hey, Levi, thank you so very much for being on the show. And again, good luck to you this weekend. No injuries, hopefully, for the Raiders. And we'll see you down the line, okay?
All right. See you.
You just listened to a special segment recorded for the 12 for 12's radio show, episode 55, with guest Levi Damien of SB Nation's Silver and Black Pride. This is your host, Paul Beyer. Feel free to listen to more on our radio page at 12for12s.com, and as well as visiting the YouTube page for 12 for 12s, where you can listen to all the past commentary shows and interviews going all the way back to the beginning last year. Thanks again, Levi, for being here, and have a wonderful day, evening, whenever you listen to this. This is 12 for 12s, and your host, Paul Beyer, signing off. Go Hawks.